Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will now begin. Please welcome to the stage, Ricky Safer.
Thank you. We are so excited to see this huge group of people together in person again. It sends shivers down my spine. I'm so excited, and we're all excited to see you. And we had a meeting this morning with the newcomers. We have 144 new people who've never been before. So this is very exciting. So we are going to start off. So I'm Ricky Safer. I think you all know I'm also a PSC patient and the founder and volunteer CEO of PSC Partners Seeking a Cure.
And I'm Ricky's husband, although not Ricky. Anyway, known here as the Bowtie Man.
We'd like to thank you for joining us for our 19th Patient Caregiver Conference. We're so excited to be together. As I just said, it's been 3 years of starting out having an in-person conference, planning it, and then making it virtual. So now we're back together. If you're new to our PSC family, we know you're anxious and wondering why you're here, but the rest of us will make sure, as we always do, that by the end of the weekend, you will feel like part of our community, our family, by the end of the weekend.
This year, we are welcoming 271 attendees, of which 144 are newcomers. We have 21 participants from Canada, as well as attendees from Austria, Germany, Israel, Netherlands, Norway, and the United Kingdom.
And
Spain.
And also, would Mel Sauter stand up a minute? I found out yesterday it's his big birthday today. So where is Mel? We'll wish him a big happy birthday.
Celebrating.
He must be off celebrating. All right, We'll catch him later. All right. So we're excited to be kicking off this meeting. And for yesterday and today, we had another special opportunity we've never had before. So we had a 2-day meeting with our International Collaborative Research Network. So we brought in 45 researchers, and they have been spending 2 days sharing their ideas of what are the gaps in research, what's the direction for us to go from now into the future. Some wonderful, wonderful ideas came out of it. So, and these researchers will all be our speakers during the weekend, and you will also meet them during meals. So we welcome all of you. Thank you. Wait, I'm not done.
Oh.
So let's see what I want to say here. Oh, and tomorrow's during the general session tomorrow, the very first session, you will get a summary of all the main ideas that came out of this 2-day meeting. Okay.
During meals, please feel free to sit with these medical professionals. As part of our goal of ICR Network is to share our different perspectives on the road to finding new therapies and an eventual cure.
So as background to the creation of this ICR network, which you'll hear a lot about, in 2018, with the help of Dr. Josh Korzenik and Dr. Chris Bowlus, who are both sitting here, we applied for a $500,000 grant from the Chan Zuckerberg initiative called CZI. So this grant we were thrilled to be chosen to be among the 30 rare disease organizations that were chosen for this. And the goal of the Rare as One grant was the creation of an international collaborative research network driven by patients, implemented by patients, and patient-centered. A core group of us at PSC Partners took the collaborative and interactive training, and this weekend is both the culmination of this grant and also the beginning of a journey of researchers and clinicians collaborating with our community to guide future research.
Our patient community continues to play an important role in the ICR network. As the topics for this week's working group came from crowdsourcing patient responses when we asked the question, what matters most to you regarding your PSC? Based on your responses, we identify and prioritize the research questions which the working group discussed.
And just a quick reminder that our expert speakers this weekend are here to educate our community, but please do not ask them for any personal medical advice.
Our thanks go out to all our community and corporate sponsors who help make this conference possible and cover a large percentage of the actual cost for each conference attending. We couldn't put together this program without you. Very special thanks to our top two corporate partners, Ipsen and Mirum, as well as our contributing partners, Chemomab. I'll get this right. Yes, thank you. SCN, Pliant, and Sanofi. We also appreciate our community supporting partner, the Kenneth S. Hollander Charitable Foundation, our vision partner, the Hatchett family, and the rest of our community partners. We also offer a heartfelt thank you to Ken Hollander, whose charitable foundation offered up 25 generous scholarships to patients in need of financial support in order to attend the conference.
I also want to give a special shout out to all our devoted, incredible caregivers. Without you, those of us living with PSC wouldn't be able to live life in such a positive fashion. So thank all of you as well. Please listen. Please listen to the short video on CVent, where I briefly talk about our efforts to integrate DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, into our mission, our culture, programs, policies, staff, board, volunteers, and throughout our wider patient caregiver community. The 1 in 10,000 people living with PSC throughout the world represent all genders, races, ethnicities, disabilities, socioeconomic statuses, and sexual orientations. And we really want our PSC partners community to mirror the real-world PSC community. So if you haven't already, please fill out our DEI survey. The QR code is on CVent.
Now, we'll briefly run through some conference logistics. Please wear your name tags, assuming you like to eat, tags to get into all sessions and meals. On your registrations, if you filled out a special food request, show your name tag to a server during the meals.
We are strongly recommending the wearing of masks indoors to help protect our PSC patient community who are living with elevated health risks. So we're handing out masks at the registration desk if you'd like to wear one but didn't have one. And thanks to Mirum Pharmaceutical, who provided those masks for us. If you're having symptoms, please stay in your room, and we do have a few COVID tests at the registration desk if you need it. And one more thing, to continue prioritizing the health of our PSC community, we'll be hosting our meals outside on what's called the Opium Terrace of all names, but that's where our meals will be.
We're going green this year, and all conference information is on CVent app. If you'd like help with the app, stop by Del Mar Del Mar 1.
During breaks and meals, take time to visit our exhibit booths. If you're a PSCer and you haven't yet joined our PSC patient registry, please go talk to them and think about joining.
If you'd like to sport some of this beautiful PSC Partners gear, visit our shop in Del Mar 2.
No, you didn't say this. On your registration form, if you mark that you have a food allergy or restriction, it's marked on your name tag. So every time we have a meal or snack, just show it to one of the servers and they'll bring you the special food for you.
Okay, reminders for the day. After this session, you will attend the 2 breakout sessions that you chose during registration, which are listed on the back of your name tag. There will be a 30-minute break with snacks on the Opium Terrace between the 2 sessions today.
And then I know it's a little bit late, but you don't want to miss our last session today, which is from 5 to 6, about clinical trial landscape in PSC. Come learn about the ongoing PSC clinical trials and see if you might be interested in being considered, you might consider joining one of them.
And this is an announcement you're probably interested in. Dinner starts at 7 p.m. and you will be seated by region. Pick up your table assignment card as you arrive.
Now it's my pleasure. You can step down.
I've been told to sit down.
John? Okay, now it's my pleasure to introduce our first two speakers and conference co-hosts who would like to welcome everyone here. Both are respective members of PSC Partners Scientific Medical Advisory Committee. Dr. Korzenik is the director of the Resnick Family Research Center for PSC and the Crohn's and Colitis Center at Brigham and Women's Hospital. His research is focused on developing new therapies for PSC based on a better understanding of the relationship between PSC and IBD. Dr. Chris Bowlus is the Lena Valenti Professor of Medicine and the Chief of the Division of Gastroenterology and Hepatology at the University of California, Davis School of Medicine. His extensive research is in autoimmune liver disease, including the immunopathogenesis of PSC. He also chairs the Consortium for Autoimmune Liver Disease. Dr. Bowlus is co-chair of this conference, as I said, as well as co-chair of the PSC Partners Scientific Medical Advisory Committee. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks very much and welcome. We're delighted to be here and delighted to have you here. We know that what goes on in Vegas is supposed to stay in Vegas, but I just want to remind you, you're not in Vegas, you're in Henderson. And so we want you to share what you learn here with everybody outside. And we're eager to share with you what we've been doing both over the last 2 days in terms of trying to think through an agenda, trying to get a sense of where we are and where we need to go to get effective therapies for PSC. When we talk in terms of trying to have a patient-informed, patient-centered research agenda, what does that really mean? What that means is we really want the patient voice to be incorporated in terms of our priorities, our work. And so I encourage you not to be intimidated by scientific terminology, to really ask the important questions, as we were talking about in our own scientific sessions, that often it's the medical student who knows perhaps the least who comes up with the most important questions. And they ask questions that everyone says, oh, everybody knows that, and then you try to answer it and you don't, and you can't. And so we rely on you to help share with us what your priorities are and to hear the patient voice. And I bring some of the patient voice myself a little bit. I'm father of a son, not with PSC, but with ulcerative colitis, and my wife has ulcerative colitis as well. My son was diagnosed at age 3. And a quirky, odd thing is we have 2 cats and a dog, and actually one of the cats has the feline equivalent of PSC, which is an odd thing. It's uncommon in cats, but it's still not completely rare. And similarly, there's no effective therapy. So, but I share with you that area of frustration, that we need to make progress quickly. We try to operate with a sense of urgency, that we really need to make significant breakthroughs. And so we really want to evaluate whatever we do, not just in terms of, is it an interesting scientific question, because there's so many interesting scientific questions, but will it really get us forward in a significant way that's going to impact on your lives in the near term. And so that's really where we're at, where we're trying to approach things, and look forward to the next couple days, and look forward to hearing from you and your ideas as well. So thanks for being here, thanks for having us, and I'll turn it over to Chris.
Yeah, I just have a few comments, and thanks for Josh for really doing the major work here. For those of you, I don't think you know this, but Josh and I were fellows some number of years ago. I think we're close to 30 now, so this is...
It might be a typo, I think that's a typo.
I think 31 years for you, only 30 for me, I think is what it was. That's all right. Anyway, it's great to be here with Josh and all of you, and I've been to these conferences over the years. We've hosted them a couple of times at Davis. And I know there's a lot of new patients here for the first time, newly diagnosed, and so there's a lot to take in here. And there's the research aspect, the care aspect, and I think every year I've been involved with these, patients come away after their first ones like, wow, that was amazing. And I hope you all get that same experience. And as Josh was saying, don't be intimidated to ask questions, even if it's not about the science or the medicine, just to share your experience, because we keep learning how patients, experience this disease, and that helps inform us as well. And we'll try to answer any questions we can. So hopefully at the end of the weekend, you all come away feeling better, feeling more knowledgeable, having some tools to deal with PSC, and understanding where things are going and where we want to get to. So I look forward to a wonderful weekend with you all, and welcome.
Next, I'd like to introduce Mahesh Krishna. He's a third-year medical student at Johns Hopkins Medical School, and he hopes to find an effective therapy in the future, as he said, so that no other kid has to feel like he did when he was first diagnosed with PSC. We all know how isolating that is. So he has volunteered for PSC Partners as a writer about his experience and about the latest scientific literature on PSC, as a moderator for peer group, and a mentor for new conference attendees. He's also been part of our research committee. He's a member of the PSC Partners Board of Directors, and Mahesh today is going to talk about his personal experience. So, Mahesh.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Ricky. So I'm Mahesh. Nice to meet you guys. Medicine, in my opinion, is more than just about the science. It's really about the patient story. William Osler, one of the most prominent physicians in modern medicine and one of the founders of Hopkins, once said, "If you listen to your patient, he or she will tell you the diagnosis." Therefore, I think it's very appropriate that we center this conference around the patient story. I've been asked to talk a little bit about my story, but I think it's more appropriate to think of this as about the common threads that we all in the community share about our experience with PSC. When I was 15, about 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with PSC. I clearly remember not being fazed by another 3-letter acronym, since I had already been diagnosed with IBD for a year. However, when I looked to my mom, a usually stoic physician, cry, I realized there was something a little bit different about this diagnosis. I remember Googling the disease and seeing average time to liver transplantation or death was around 10 years. Obviously, it's a pretty scary thing for a 15-year-old to read. I felt uncertain, unsure of my future, and a little hopeless, which I'm sure is a feeling all of you in the audience can relate with. However, after a process of self-pity and grieving for a future that I had envisioned, I turned my feelings of uncertainty into resolve. And it wasn't an easy process, it took a while. But I had this resolve that I wanted to try and find a therapy for this disease so no kid would have to experience what I did when I was first diagnosed. Since my diagnosis, a lot has happened. I've graduated high school, graduated from college at Rice University, published a couple papers, won a couple awards, lost a colon, had a countless number of ERCPs, had a few hospital stays, got mugged at gunpoint a couple times, and now I'm in my 4th year of medical school at Hopkins. The main message I wanted to get across is that a diagnosis of PSC is not the end. In fact, I think the strength that I gained from dealing with the disease has made me a more empathetic and resilient person than I would have ever been otherwise. Additionally, all of us still have a story to write about the disease known as primary sclerosing cholangitis. We're in an incredibly exciting time with PSC Partners, and you're going to hear a lot about the initiatives that we're doing, which I believe will speed up the find for an effective cure. However, these initiatives start and end with us, the patients. I hope you all will partner with me in helping write a happy end to the story for PSC.
Thank you, Mahesh. And as far as telling stories, also for those of you who are new, but actually this is the first time we've done this, we have a community booth, and we hope that all of you, patients or caregivers, will come in and tell your stories, write us notes, and so on. We're going to put them together and share them afterwards. So our next speaker is Dr. Gideon Hirschfield, FRCP, PhD from University of Toronto, at the University of Toronto. Dr. Gideon Hirschfield holds the inaugural Lilly and Terry Horner Chair in Autoimmune Liver Disease at the University of Toronto, and he is Professor of Medicine. As a clinician scientist, he manages translational and trials-based clinical science with the goal of advancing therapies for patients with inflammatory liver diseases, including PSC, that prevent the need for transplantation. Dr. Hirschfield is a member of the PSC Partners Scientific Medical Advisory Committee, and today he will talk to us about the state of PSC research in 2023.
So thank you, Ricky, and thank you to the organizers. This is, wow to be up here. This is like probably the hardest talk of the year for me to give. This is like 360-degree appraisal for any of you who, want to appraise their doctor. But, it's a privilege for me to be here today to talk to patients living with PSC. It's a difficult disease. It occupies a lot of my time, but occupies a lot more of your time. It means a lot to us, my colleagues here, many of the colleagues in the room, to look after patients with PSC, and we're very privileged to do so. What I'm going to try and do in the next 20 minutes or so is just give an overview of themes around PSC and PSC research. I am going to use scientific slides because everything I'm telling you, you have a right to know about, but also really it is about themes, it's about concepts. It's about the collection of concepts that we need as a community with your help to drive forward so that we can do a better job in the future. These are my disclosures for the records. I will work with any clinical trial company that wants to do a trial in PSC, okay, because it's so important. Okay, to set the scene for this conference, I want you to think about what is the disease that you or you're a caregiver for or a family member has. Primary sclerosing cholangitis. The way I think about it was this figure that we drew, the 6 C's of PSC. And in fact, this slide actually encompasses much of the entire talk. You will notice that there are 5 terms which really relate to what happens to you living with disease. Covert. Sometimes people don't know that you're symptomatic. Cholangitis, the definition of the disease, the inflammation in your bile ducts. Cirrhosis, what you don't want, but some of you will develop because of chronic inflammation. Colitis, that cousin of PSC, because really it's the same disease, the colitis and the cholangitis. And I can't not say the word cancer just because I'm talking at a patient meeting, because it's on everybody's mind. But they're the 5 C's, and what was the 6th C? And in fact, the 6th C was chosen by the patients. I emailed Ricky, I emailed Martine in the UK, and we had some email conversation, and it was clear that it had to be cure. Okay, we talked about control, we talked about, coping, but no, we agreed at the end it should be cure, because that will be our ultimate goal through research, through understanding your lived experiences. We would like to cure this disease. It may be that we don't get there immediately, but the sooner we start and the progress that we're making, the better. And so on this slide, you can see where we are tackling the compartments of this disease to understand it. The inflammation in the bile ducts, the inflammation in the bowel, the scarring and the premalignant potential, and then how do we measure that over time? Why is research therefore important? It's probably quite an easy question, because effective treatments will only come with understanding what causes disease. And that is something that we are really is hampered with in PSC, because truly we don't have exactly why people get PSC, and that makes our treatments really not directed to the exact cause. And the 3 boxes are the different kinds of scientific pursuit that many of us take part in. Why me? Why children? Why men more than women? Why so symptomatic? So that we're going to address with epidemiology, genetics, the so-called exposome, everything that's around you in your environment. Why the biliary tree? Why the large bile duct, not the small bile duct? Why is there this association with the colon? Is it one disease or two diseases? Why is cancer such a big issue in this disease which stands out for other autoimmune diseases that I look after? And why even when you have this amazing gift of a new life with liver transplantation, must you live with the chance of the disease coming back? And then fundamentally, despite all the advances that we've seen in lots of other diseases, why is this disease so difficult to treat? Who should be helping us the most to study it when we put patients in clinical trials? And how do we cross that treatment goalpost so that we have a treatment that really is effective and changes what happens? And, philosophically, and, you'll hear a lot about it over the next couple of days, what should we treat? Maybe we should treat the liver, but maybe we should treat the bowel. Maybe that will be more effective. So that's why research is important. But really, in fact, it's about real people, okay? That's why research is important. I've been very privileged to look after many, many nice patients in my career. This is Jessica. And Jessica and I did a talk. And what I learned on that day was she was a much better speaker than me. Okay, I gave a very boring talk on autoimmune liver disease and PSC. Jessica gave a phenomenal talk on living with PSC and her life experience and how to cope. So it's about real people. That's why we do it. Okay, and people who do amazing things. Again, I searched the internet for my patients, okay? And this is Afsana, who's become a champion for living donor transplantation at University Health Network in Toronto. That's an amazing thing to do for someone who, needed the gift to then give back to get more people to get that gift, okay? And to ask my patients to take part. So this was Catherine, she was in the UK. To take part in clinical research is to empower you to cope with uncertainty, but we know that you are giving us something, your time, you may be taking a risk, you don't know whether something's going to work, we may ask you to do a biopsy, innumerable blood tests, but to try and take part will help us slowly to change things. But PSC patients are even better than that, okay? Because it doesn't always end as happily as I'd like. I know the names of all of my patients who are not here today, okay? And many of my patients who are not here today still give to help us for a better future to fund our research. To them, I say thank you, and to Mark, I particularly say thank you. Because our patients want a new journey, okay? This is the journey I think you experience when you're living with PSC from our qualitative research. So some of the research we did, we just talked to PSC patients and we just listened. And we had a whole session on it discussing listening. Climbing the mountain to get a diagnosis, that may not be as easy as it sounds. Reaching the summit when you're finally told what's wrong with you. Falling off the cliff when you understand the impact of the diagnosis or you read about it. Hopefully you go to PSC Partners websites and Facebook, and that helps a lot. But then soldiering on, okay, and trying to live a full life and dealing with what life then gives you. And we also listen to you because you can speak for yourselves. Because we understand the blood tests, the MRIs, the colonoscopies, the biopsies, the ERCPs, the transplants. But the symptoms we're not the best at. You're the best at the symptoms. We listened to some of the comments and the themes that came out around symptoms, pain, brain fog, cholangitis, fatigue, itch, weight loss, multiple symptoms. The fatigue is like a blanket coming over you. I just can't keep my eyes open. I thought I was walking through treacle. Okay, so we are as a community, with your help, trying to research the lived experience, because although that may not give us the cause of PSC, in fact, it will help us get to the goal of curing it with better treatments. So you take your liver out, okay, and you look down the microscope, and this is what you'll see. This is like the liver view of PSC. Chronic inflammation around the bile duct, so-called onion skin fibrosis, okay? It's a scarring disease. It's like concrete around the medium to large bile ducts. That's one view of PSC that we want to tackle with better drugs for fibrosis. But with technology, we can thank the Japanese. Some of you may have had this. They can now stick telescopes into your bile ducts, not just contrast, but actual telescopes. No wonder you have pain. I mean, that looks painful. That is not someone's bowel, that is someone's bile duct. That is a very inflammatory, nasty-looking, sore bile duct. It will hurt, it will scar, it will become infected. And you see how different it looks to the scarring when we just take the liver out at the transplant. And that then challenges us from a research perspective of what to treat. Do I want to focus on the scarring, or do I want to focus on the inflammation, and that the nasty ulcers that essentially are in the bile ducts? But with technology, we're going to be able to tackle both. So when we are, as researchers, trying to piece together what to do, we start by just seeing and describing what we see across all of our autoimmune liver disease. So I look after, 3 groups of patients. I look after, women in their 50s and 60s with what's known as primary biliary cholangitis. That's the top of the slide. They're tiny little bile ducts, the lymphocytes, the immune system is picking away at them. We have made huge progress in treating that disease with patient participation. We have reduced the rates of transplantation significantly. It was the leading cause of transplantation when transplant was started. We will do the same for PSC. We will apply what we have learned in getting new drugs to the market for PBC, and we can do the same for PSC. Autoimmune hepatitis, which causes a lot of concern about overlap, is inflammation of the liver cells. And then in the middle is PSC, what we're talking about today, which is this, fibrous cholangitis, scarring, pre-malignant condition. But we need to then work out that whole journey that you go on from the beginning all the way to a scarred liver. And it's a family affair. So when we diagnose our patients, in fact, there are, features similar in some of those diseases, but we sort of silo them. PBC looks like this, autoimmune hepatitis looks like that, PSC looks like that. Sometimes it overlaps. Behind the scenes, what is the state of the art in research? It's your genome. Your genes are slightly different, not hugely different, but slightly different. That predisposes to you. It's your epigenome. That is changes in the bile ducts from being, exposed to different environmental triggers mean that they behave differently. It's your exposome. So by all means, we all need to enjoy ourselves this weekend, but our exposome is everything that's around us, Smoking, socioeconomics, drug exposures, industrial exposures, environmental pollutants, etc., etc. We've not been able to put our finger on it because maybe the exposome is 10 years before we actually diagnose you. And then, of course, it's very appealing to study the microbiome, and I will talk about it, and those are all the bugs and fungi and viruses that live in our bowel, but we don't actually know as much as we think we would like to know about how they all interact. But they are the 4 compartments that are contributing where you'll discover, if you can, feel free to talk to many of my colleagues who are here, ask them what they're doing in the lab and ask them what their mouse model is doing. And one of them will be working on a cancer model. Someone else will be working on a fibrosis model. Someone else will be doing human studies on the microbiome. Other people will be doing population studies. That's the state of the art for research in PSC. And we're still learning. So this is a study we're doing across Ontario for all the Americans. Canada's just beneath you, and we're this big country with very few people, but we're able in our provinces to use our health data sets to look at everyone living in our province. So we've been looking at all the people living with PSC in Ontario, population about 15 million. And what do we discover? We already know that you're the nicest patients, but there's a socio-economic gradient. That doesn't mean that poor people don't get PSC, they do, but actually there's an overrepresentation of the people who live have the most highest income and have the least material deprivation. There's an overrepresentation of PSC. This suggests to me something about the environment, maybe something about diet, something that's changed over the last 100 years as we've moved between rural and urban living. But it's important from a research perspective because it helps us then ask the right questions as we design further science. How do we diagnose you? With MRI. We used to have to do ERCP. We don't anymore. We save that for interventions. We use MRI to diagnose sclerosing cholangitis. What is the other aspect of research that's happening at the same time is to get better diagnosis. So this is just one of the new technologies that are coming. I'm not saying this is necessarily the best or will be the best, and there'll be others. But the point is we are moving from just MRCP to using quantitative technologies when you have your MRI scan to look at your bile ducts, to look at the patterns. This is the patterns of bile ducts in different autoimmune diseases and healthy, and PSC is at the very bottom, and the computer reconstruction is on your right of the screen. We hope that if we go beyond just you having your MRI every 1 to 2 years and using that information, those pictures become our next research, become our next science, and they become, how we test whether new drugs are working or not working. We use mice to help us. Mice are not humans. Okay, they are experimental models that will help us get only so far. This is a classical model of PSC in a mouse, or murine cholangitis to be more specific. In this mouse, the mouse does not make the right bile. The bile is incredibly stringent and toxic, and because the bile is toxic, you get a sclerosing cholangitis in this mouse. That teaches us a lot about what's happening in our patients, okay? So, as doctors looking after PSC, we often come from gastroenterology backgrounds, immunology backgrounds, biochemical backgrounds, but bile is a very complex set of molecules which are inflammatory, which interact with the immune system, but clearly can be quite damaging to your own bile ducts. Normally, you cope with it. In PSC, less so. We use other mice to study what happens when we take a mouse. This is a mouse that develops a form of cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis, in fact, the gene that's involved in cystic fibrosis is actually a transporter protein that's pumping chloride, okay, and is actually in your bile ducts. If you give this mouse colitis, you'll also give it bile duct injury. So again, we learn. We already learned a little bit about cystic fibrosis. This wasn't just a blind experiment because we'd listened to patients and people had studied, and particularly in Israel, the genes for cystic fibrosis in patients with PSC, and they'd found that there were some differences, and that was one of the reasons that people then did the experiment. So research is bi-directional. We listen to what we learn from our patients, we take it back into the lab, we see what we discover in the lab, we bring it back to the clinic, hopefully with a new therapy. We're also sort of having to challenge ourselves, and that's actually one of the fun parts of research, because the talk that I might, give today, I hope, if I get invited back, Ricky, in 10 years' time, will be different, okay? We didn't know this, until the last few years, that in fact bile acids are really important in the colon. Josh will know this, okay? Bile acids, the colonic mucosa, T cells, okay, are being affected by the bile that's going into your bowel. And the same thing is happening in your liver. Those bile acids that we just think of as detergents and signaling molecules, in fact, are setting the scene based on, interactions with bugs in the bowel, are setting the scene for how your immune system is working and how your immune system will cope with new environmental challenges. That then leads to potential new therapies. You heard about Chemomab, one of the sponsors. This is a paper, talking about what's known as a chemokine. A chemokine is a small molecule that attracts things to itself, or attracts things to cells from which it's released. The details are not too important here, except to say that there's a clinical trial of a drug that blocks CCL24. That clinical trial is based on the fact the experiments in the laboratory show that when the bile duct is injured, CCL24 is asking for more damage. It's saying, come hit me harder, okay? So then we have the hypothesis that we can block that in a clinical trial. We will test the hypothesis that it may help our patients living with PSC. And that's how we decide which clinical trials we do. We weigh up the research in 2023, we look at the evidence, and we say, this is how we should target our disease. I always come back to patients because it's my favorite part of the week, and I do a lot of clinic because I really enjoy it, okay? And we try and learn from decades and decades of experience of what happens to our patients. And one of the hardest things is to be diagnosed with an autoimmune liver disease when you're a child. Harder as much for the parent as it is for the child. And then to ask what happens over not 5 years or 10 years, but 20, 30 years. And what we found when we followed up patients over 30 years who'd come to Deirdre Kelly, who was a retired pediatric hepatologist in the UK, was that many of our patients started off looking like autoimmune hepatitis, but by the time they came to me and then into the adult world, they had PSC. And the timing of their PSC was timed with them developing inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, okay? That tells us we have to understand that journey. So it might look very inflammatory. We might use the name autoimmune hepatitis, but probably it isn't. It's probably the first presentations of PSC that over time morph. The body focuses more on the bile ducts for reasons we don't understand. And the change is the development of colitis. And it's even harder because maybe colitis is asymptomatic in some patients. You know, there's another paper out there showing that, in fact, there's a lot of people with inflammation that we don't know about. Another one of the research themes I just wanted to raise, which sometimes doesn't get much discussion, is physics. Okay, physics and blood supply. I got this off the internet. And then I pinched a picture from a paper that I found on the internet as well. You know, in the bottom on the left is this. We have an amazing Japanese fellow who's doing live donor transplants. He draws the pictures of the bile ducts and he posts it on the internet. So before he does an operation, he's spending hours making sure he does a good operation. There's your biliary tree and your gallbladder. How complicated is that? Then look on the side on your right. The blood supply to the bile ducts is pretty unique. It is highly relevant to why some patients run into problems after liver transplantation with their bile ducts because of a very unique relationship of arterial blood supply to the bile ducts. So we do need to do some anatomy. It may not be the most exciting technology that we're doing, but it's actually really important. And the other thing that makes PSC stand out to other diseases is in the top left. Your bile ducts are tubes. There is a flow of bile that starts at the periphery and goes out and drains into your bowel. When tubes get blocked, pressure rises. It's no different to getting your kitchen sink blocked, okay? You know, if you're not very good when you're washing up your plates like me, you know, then it doesn't drain very quickly, okay? If your bile ducts get blocked, pressure rises. That pressure effect is actually damaging in its own right. The biliary tree senses it. We need to study that more. I suspect that's actually quite relevant into what happens to our patients is what's known as intraluminal pressure. And some investigators have been studying actually the architecture of the liver as the pressure rises in the bile ducts and how that changes what happens. Many of you have helped with genetic studies. There is a genetic predisposition to PSC. This was a study that caused an awful lot of excitement in the community, and so it should. It was a family where they found the gene for PSC. So that's great, really insightful, but it's what we call in science a phenocopy. I'm afraid the other, many, many thousands of patients that they then looked at didn't have the gene mutation, okay? But it taught us that we can get an exact copy of PSC-IBD from one change in one gene, and therefore that helps us then do better research, okay? We knew that the genes that you have are different to the genes that someone has ulcerative colitis because just by listening to you and listening to the patterns of your inflammation of colitis, more right-sided, more mild, you don't have inflammation necessarily at the bottom of your colon, more cancer. We knew that that was different to the ulcerative colitis and Crohn's that Josh often sees. And then we were not surprised that the gene signatures for PSC are similar but different. So I think PSC-IBD, and researchers taught us this, is a distinct entity, okay? It's not ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, it's PSC-IBD, okay? Because the genes overlap, but not perfectly, only 50%. It then tied in really neatly with some of the epidemiology. I talked to you about epidemiology of socioeconomics, okay? If I were to ask you, I won't, okay? The vast majority of our patients living with PSC are non-smokers. Okay, 95 to 100% are non-smokers. When they took all the genes for PSC, and then they used some clever technology, because there are genes actually that predispose people to smoke, lo and behold, that came out as an association. Okay, so something about smoking, okay, is then linked to PSC. Again, state-of-the-art research, this was only published last year. Smoking behavior has a genetic predisposition. Smoking behavior genes are actually correlated with PSC. So we have to learn. This is then what's happening. Your liver lives next to your bowel lives next to your liver. They are talking to each other all the time, okay? Your liver very cleverly is not allowing your body to get sick all the time in health. It's incredibly efficient at taking all that nasty bugs that that feed the liver and making sure you don't get sick. But all those immune cells are being activated and they're circulating, and there's some aberrant inflammation both in the colon and in the bile ducts. And the link may be, I'd like to be cautious in this, what's going on in your colon. So when we looked at people's colon, and we've just on the slide just put a few examples, again, the details are not really that important, okay? But the microbiome does look different. So if you look at someone who's healthy, someone who's got colitis, someone who's got Crohn's, someone who's got PSC IBD, the bugs in their bowels are subtly different. You know, it's probably not one bug, we don't know, but it's probably a mixture of bugs. So we are going to have to spend more efforts at looking at that. And then actually within the colon, the mechanisms are different. So maybe even the inflammation that we see is not the same, which would fit with our genes. PSC IBD, as I said, is not ulcerative colitis. We may treat it the same because that's your doctor's ignorance, but science will ultimately tell us the differences. We've even started to learn about why do our patients have to suffer the risk of, you have to have your colonoscopy every year. Why do you have your colonoscopy every year? You don't want to get colon cancer. Your gastroenterologist will help you, okay? We've been able to pick that up. We've been able to pick up, and our colleagues from Norway are here at this meeting, how bugs in your bowel do different metabolism, and because of that different metabolism, they make different vitamins. So, what is the future? We're going to measure everything. We're going to measure it in all different layers. We're then going to basically piece together the story. We're going to come to you and we're going to say, you've got to do clinical trials to get the answer. We thought we knew about URSO, we didn't, okay? The trials will be informed by the science. And with that, I'll say thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hirschfield. That was a wonderful introduction to PSC research. So, and I will say, as I was listening to him, I was just thinking that when we started this organization, there was hardly any research going on, and you will hear this weekend about so much research. I know we don't have a cure, and we're still looking for new therapies, but there is a lot going on, and please know that we are working as much as we can, and if you're a patient and you're interested in possibly getting into a clinical trial, please come to the session today, go visit the booths, and think about it. So next, I would like to introduce Dr. Stephen Rossi. He's recently joined PSC Partners as our Chief Scientific Officer, and he's helping to lead the many research efforts of our organization. Prior to joining PSC Partners, he has spent the last 30 years working in clinical research, developing new drugs to treat a variety of liver diseases, including PSC. He's well known to PSC Partners through collaborations to bring the patient voice into pharma trials and also as a volunteer advisor on several of our key research initiatives. Dr. Rossi will talk today about driving progress through collaboration, CZI RARES 1, and collaborative research.
Well, thank you, Ricky, and thank you, Josh and Chris, for, again, championing this important, very important meeting that brings the community and the researchers together. And I've been working in liver diseases, as Ricky said, for quite some time, and PSC has been a passion. My connection is obviously through some of the clinical work and research I've done. But I have a personal connection as well. One of my best friends was Tim Hooley's nephew, and Tim was so valuable, if you didn't know him, to, I think, a lot of the energy in the early stages of the organization. And his spirit and connection really motivated me to continue to want to work with PSC. About a year ago, I decided I wanted to get out of industry and take a pause and decide what I could do next. And Ricky definitely opened up the opportunity with the organization for me to come back and do something that really feels meaningful. So I'm really happy to be here and part of leading some of the mission to find that cure. And there's more going on with PSC Partners, and we have a unique opportunity as an organization to really drive research forward. So PSC Partners has been involved in a variety of clinical activities, especially for those of you who are new, but also research, largely in a supportive capacity, but still working with the research community to help drive an understanding of the disease to move things forward. This includes the conferences, the research grants, which I'm pleased to say actually just opened up again for application for the annual funding. Almost 120 grants have been actually awarded this time, with close to $6 million in research. And most of that funding has come from the community to really support this, and that is so key. Yes, you should. But this is also where I got to know PSC Partners, was bringing the patient voice into pharma trials, having them review my protocols to see, is this something a patient will actually do? Helping with trial recruitment. It's so challenging in rare diseases to find patients for trials who want to participate and can actually have access. And then patient education about clinical trials. It's a big unknown for a lot of people, and it's really been important to bring that sort of comfort around participating in a trial. Rachel Gomel has led our patient registry, which is so important, and if you aren't a part of it, you really should join, because the voice that comes from that has informed so much of what we're doing today research-wise. We've presented at different forums in the industry. We actually are part of a regulatory industry, clinical, and a patient organization called the PSC Forum, where we come together and actually try and find solutions for PSC, and we have a very strong seat at the table there. And actually, one of the clinical things that was so important is we actually, it sounds basic, but there wasn't a code to really identify within the medical records what is PSC. And that was championed in partnership with the clinicians that in 2018, we actually have a specific code to identify this important disease in the medical records. So PSC Partners has actually been so key in being a part of supporting research and clinical practice, but we're moving to the next step, which is actually becoming a stakeholder and executing research. And that's through something you're going to hear a lot about, which is called patient-centered research. And you've heard it used today. And a lot of people think, okay, a patient-centered research or patient engagement or participation is really, it's being part of a trial, okay? And that is such an important thing to continue. But this is really moving in a different direction, and it's bringing the patient voice, your voices, strongly into what is decided to be done for research and actually how it gets set up and executed. And so it starts with the concept of the patient actually really helping to identify what are the questions and the research and the things in your day-to-day life with this disease that are important to you. What would make an impact if we could find something, be it a cure, be it fixing a symptom, getting better care. And what it does then is it brings the patient voice in, not at the end, but starting right up front when that question gets identified, and every step of the way, the patient is part of a stakeholder in the organization of helping to drive that forward. And I can say PSC Partners is positioned beautifully and has been part of that process already, and we expect to see that grow even further. It looks at how this compares and brings in outcomes research. And then importantly, the things that get done hopefully get incorporated into your day-to-day care. So there's a broad impact that patient-centered research has, and it really comes down to your voices. And I'm going to show you through step by step where your voice, be it a new voice or patients who have been a part of the organization for so long, have made a huge impact to getting us to the point we are today. So the patient already and in other disease areas has been such an important part of driving therapies outside of PSC, and we have models and roadmaps for where this can actually be effective. If you go back to even the early days with HIV, it really was the patient organizations that actually drove the pharmaceutical industry and the government to do something about it and find a cure. Now that was a really tough and it was a very tough disease and a very acute and a very difficult time. And the relationship sometimes was adversarial, but it's really grown over time. And in the future, as each of the diseases and patient organizations became stronger and actually more partnership, we saw things like with breast cancer, cystic fibrosis in particular, where the patient organizations and registries have helped identify and develop and get approved new therapies for that condition. We have situations where a very rare disease like Castleman's has actually been advanced through a patient organization, and most recently even the whole long COVID issue that's come up. A lot of the research and issues that have been driven forward were from a collaborative effort through patient organization. So how has our voice, and your voice in particular, become part of what we're doing now at PSC Partners? Well, it started with some of the things that Ricky highlighted, which is there's three really key activities that brought the voice forward to get us to where our research initiatives are. The first is the Chan Zuckerberg grant, the Rare as One grant that Ricky mentioned. But the second was a very important event that we had that's branched from that, which was in combination and support from the FDA, what's called a patient-focused drug development forum. And this really allowed the patients to bring their voice to the regulators and to industry and say, what is important for us when we look at new therapies? What came from that, though, was a survey that was done that we got feedback on what was important, the impact of your disease, your symptoms, clinical trials. 800 patients filled out this survey, and that has been the foundation for a lot of what we've done of prioritizing what we do forward. And that was actually conducted and executed through the registry. So again, being part of the registry and really making your voice heard through that is so important. And what that roadmap did for us is it outlined for us to do a series of educational webinars and a variety of activities that really started the process of what you see there, which is educating the community about research. How do you come up with those questions? How do you turn what you're feeling into a research initiative? How do we build the community? And some of what we did today of the partnering of patient and researcher community at the meeting you'll hear about later is so important. And then how do we continue to build that and really foster what are patient-centered research priorities? So it kind of in a very simple fashion, you look at how do you capture in a systematic way, what are your needs? What do you care about? What's important to you about your disease? And then how do we take all that? You can't do everything. We have to prioritize and really identify. And with a rare disease where it's so difficult to do research and where resources are tough, it allows us to really say what's important and what's really going to make a difference. And then that lets us develop the strategic plan. And that is really where we're at right now. We've developed a really nice strategic plan you'll hear about. And we're about to launch the exciting part, which is actually putting it into action. So what we did is actually gotten attention even in the medical community. Over the last 2 years, I get to parachute in and talk about this today, but there's been a huge amount of work that's been done over the past 2 years with the clinicians, the researchers, and most importantly, the organization and the patients to come up with what is our strategic plan and the framework for the type of research we're going to do. And this actually got put into a scientific submission and is being presented actually at the medical conference, the AASLD conference up in September, or November, and is really an important place for us to show that patients in PSC can drive in a research initiative. And you can see that it's been a stepwise approach of the PFDD. We then again came back to the patients yourselves and set up focus groups to kind of refine what we were thinking, and then also brought in the experts to give us some ideas from their perspective, what were the important pieces. We came up with the research agenda, formulated that again, and over the last year or so, came back to the patient focus groups once again to get your input on what was a priority, and that landed us with our strategic plan I'll show you in a minute. This gives you an idea of sort of how this works. It's not just driven by, this is where you can see the patient has been elevated to almost an equal player in deciding what is going to be done from a research initiative. But we needed the scientific partnership of the clinicians and the researchers to really understand the technologies, the tools, the data sources, the variety of places we could go to really drive research forward. And so we did a series of important expert interviews with many of the clinicians who are here that are on the list and have given so much of their time to the organization, but also did a wide range of interviews with patients, both from the PFDD we got input and from separate interviews. And what we got was about 500 recommendations or ideas for research from just the patient voices alone. A lot of them overlapped and we bucketed them into kind of 6 key areas, but it was amazing the type of input we got from the patients. And then we did in the focus groups, we got another 100 patients who were willing to give their input and patients and care providers and family members. We aligned with what the experts said and what the patients said. And as you can see, there was some good alignment, but there was different perspectives on what was important. And then we took those, and the patient organization, PSC partners, our SMAC, and our board members all sat down and actually decided how to prioritize these. There was a very rigorous way in which we prioritized what was the framework and the important topics we were going to work on. And from that, we have 3 research pillars that really have focused, and these are broad, but they're meant to be the structure by which all the separate individual projects can kind of fall under. And this is projects that come forward need to fit under these priorities in order to help us stay focused on what we're doing. The first is really to understand the mechanism of PSC. You saw the complexity of everything that Gideon just presented, and so much is known, but so much is still unknown. And so supporting better understanding the disease, the targets, what could we go for in new therapies was really key. The other aspect, and Josh has been instrumental in helping us really drive that forward, which is the IBD-PSC relationship. There's so much we still don't understand about that. There's so many overlaps with symptoms, some differences in how patients progress when they have one or both, and really understanding that and how it may play into your symptoms and also the progression of your disease and potential therapies. And then importantly, what can we really do directly to support the development of new therapies? And right now, you'll see in a minute, we're actually active in supporting all of those right now and are about to make some really interesting moves forward. So here is now taking all this that I just presented you and putting it into action. And it's not like these are sort of future thinking, big picture, they may happen. These are things that are actually all happening as we speak and about to launch. The first is the PSC Partners Grants, and as I said, we are already launching this year's grant cycle and are excited to bring that forward. Your voice has been important in shaping what we will select this year, and importantly, so many of you, through the various fundraising that we've done, have contributed to the actual funds that will support these grants. And again, both your voice and your support in many ways has really helped shape that program and drive some important research forward. The registry continues to be an important part of this for both a foundation of putting where your information and voice can be, but we have multiple times now, as have some of the drug companies actually brought forward, proposals to get your voice brought into some of the decisions. We run surveys, we do all kinds of information where your privacy is protected, but your voice and information can be shared. Pardon me. And this is going to continue to expand. So for those of you who are new in particular, it is so important to be part of that registry. You can't understand how valuable that information has been, not only to PSC partners, but to the broader community and research. Now, we're about to move forward with a project that actually has been quite exciting, and it's a very novel approach. For many years, there's been a discussion about how do we take all this information that is out there about patients, and how do we actually support drug development potentially in a unique way? Now, you've heard possibly about natural history cohorts, and there are a lot of those out there. The one thing that was decided in conjunction with both PSC partners, but also with the expertise of Drs. Hirschfield, Bowlus, Dr. Levy in Miami, Dr. Bettina Hansen, who you will hear from, as well as Dr. Christoph Schramm in Germany, was what could we do different? And so this is a unique, one-of-a-kind project that is unlike anything that's being done out there, which is a prospective observational cohort that's going to collect information that, if we do this the right way, could replace or support being a placebo arm for a clinical trial. We've heard multiple times that having that data or having to be in a placebo-controlled study where there may be therapies available was really challenging. And this project will hopefully bring us forward to being, if we do this the right way, to really support that for future treatments and partnering with industry to bring those drugs forward for therapy. I can say again, your voices helped shape the project. In fact, some of the things we just selected for the design came from input from you in various surveys. And again, this was funded up to $4 million purely from the community. This is not coming from industry. This is coming from your community to bring this forward. And we appreciate that, and really, this is an amazing and a unique way, especially in liver diseases, of bringing this forward. We have a symptom assessment, which is really taking how do we better quantify and qualify what you're feeling in your symptoms and actually help those tools come forward not only for trials, but also for clinical care. How do you get your information about what you're experiencing and bringing that forward in a way that can be meaningfully monitored and make sure that it's being assessed? And then lastly, over this last day and a half, the ICRN network was established, but I feel like we did a great job of actually launching it and really bringing forward new ideas for research. So you'll hear about that from Josh and Chris later. You're going to hear about the WIN project from Bettina Hansen and Mary Villas, who will talk there. Donna Yvonne and Joanne Hatchett are going to talk about the symptom assessment. Jesse Kirkpatrick's going to talk some additional work around the ICRN network and the blueprint of how we may brainstorm for not only research but clinical care. And the grants partners, grants and registry, you've heard, but encourage you to talk to us about the grants and really with Rachel and the community about the registry. And I'll finish with what's so important, which is a thank you to everyone. Importantly, this would not be happening without PSC partners, staff, volunteers, and the board members. The research committee has been such an important part of driving the research, but the board has been so important in helping with the fundraising. We have a scientific medical advisory committee that has been chaired by a variety of people, including Chris, Dr. Rich Green, and others that have really been so critical in helping guide what we do both clinically and also reviewing the grants. The clinicians and researchers who have dedicated so much of their time to this forum, to a variety of things, the industry partners who continue to support these things, but most importantly, again, your voice, your support, and of yourselves, your family, the caregivers, and the friends. It's made the difference, and it will continue to make the difference as we drive forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Drs. Korzenik, Bowlus, Hirschfield, and Rossi, and Mahesh. This is a really great opening session to get us all set up and in the mood for our 2 breakout sessions. And much as we try to stay on time, I notice we're already 10 minutes late, but we will make it up. But we have a 15-minute, supposed to be a 15-minute passing session, but if you'll go to your rooms as quickly as possible. So just to remind you, the sessions you've chosen are on the back of your name tag, and then the rooms are in CVent, listed in CVent to find out where to go. I know this is very confusing, there's so many rooms here, but we have volunteers out that will help you find your room. And then real quickly, there will be a snack between the first and second breakout sessions. Make sure you stay for our clinical trials session. Dinner is at 7 o'clock, and you will be seated by the regions where you live. So when you get outside by the open terrace, there'll be a table with the table numbers on it. And I also want to thank all the researchers and clinicians who are joining us this weekend. We really appreciate it. So thank you, everyone, and please go to your session.